All right, welcome everybody. This is our second session of the Citizens Digital Academy for the City of Berea, and today we're going to talk about city finances and budgeting. And I'm joined by Andrea Morris, who's our finance director, and Andy Palcheff, our assistant finance director and administrator of our budgets. And so welcome, guys.
Good morning.
Hello.
And today we're going to get in all those things that many people don't understand, because city financing is kind of complicated. It's not like the type of accounting you do in the private sector. And so today we're going to cover some very basic topics related to our budget, related to our accounting system, and how we generate tax dollars, how we spend those tax dollars. So, okay, so Andrea, we're going to turn it over to you.
Okay, thank you very much. Today we're going to start out by talking about the role of the finance department. Then we're going to talk about the type of funds that we use and how we use fund accounting. We'll also talk about the type of revenues that we receive and how the money is expended, and then go over some of the budgetary issues. So for the role of the finance department, we are here to just be a facilitator for all of the departments. We try to assist them with their budgeting, make sure that they are in compliance with all Ohio laws, make sure that our department is in compliance with all Ohio laws and federal and state laws when it comes to budgeting and expending money and receiving money. We review all documents, whether they're each receipt that comes in, every check that goes out. We review those documents for audit compliance, and we try to assist the departments in making sure that they get everything that they need to help and make sure that the city is running smoothly. So for facilitating, what we do in our department, we have different things that we're responsible for. Obviously, we pay the bills for the city. We also have several different types of revenue streams that come in. We also have to invoice for some of the charges and permits and things that we do in the different departments, such as building department. We process payroll for all of our employees. We do budgeting, which is separated into two separate categories, which are our operating expenses and our capital expenses. Every year we are audited, and we produce our financial statements on what is called generally accepted accounting principles. So that's that GAAP item that you see on the screen. In order to make sure that we are doing everything in compliance like we should be, we have what's called internal controls. So for each area, whether it's receipts, payroll, or paying out of invoices, we have different people and different processes in place to make sure that we are able to combat fraud if it were to occur, be able to recognize it if it existed, and try to make sure that we have different levels of internal controls within all of these processes. So for government, we use a type of accounting that's called fund accounting. So fund accounting basically is like if you used envelope accounting at home. So if you were at home and you did envelope accounting, you would have an envelope for, say, gas money. So we do the same thing here for governmental entities. What we use as our envelope is the actual fund. So if we have a fund where we can only spend it on parks and recreation, that's all that we can spend that money that goes into that fund for those expenditures. So we'll start out here with what is a fund, and a fund segregates the monies of the city according to their legal or purpose restrictions. So we have three different broad range fund types, those being governmental funds, proprietary or business type funds, and fiduciary funds. So getting down into the depths of some of these funds, the governmental funds in general, that's where you will see the general operations of all the city. So if you see the police out performing their duties, their payroll is coming out of a governmental fund. If you're paying your water bill, that's actually a different type of fund that we'll talk about later. But the governmental funds, we have four types of governmental funds. We have the general fund, special revenue funds, debt service funds, and capital projects funds. So the general fund, the primary fund, it's used by our entity. It records all of our inflows and outflows that are not associated with special purpose funds. So we'll move into special purpose funds, and those are funds that are established to collect money that must be used for a specific purpose. So money that's collected for, say, recreation will go into that recreation fund envelope and only be used for recreation expenses and recreation revenue. And that's a special revenue fund. There has to be a special tax, be it income tax, property tax, or revenue source for a special revenue fund. So you'll see listed there, we have the recreation fund, state highway fund, and police and fire pension funds as examples. And that just means there's a special revenue source for those particular funds that we use. We have one debt service fund, and that fund accounts for our payment of our principal and interest that's due on our city debt. And then our final governmental fund is the capital projects fund, and we use these capital projects funds to account for things like the road program, any other capital road programs that you see happening around the city. They are used to account for the financial resources to be used for acquisition or construction of major capital improvements. And usually they are funded by grants, or we go out for loans, or we'll do a fund transfer into those capital project funds. Our next type of funds are business type funds, and that goes into where we actually operate some of our departments as a business. And for us, that department would be our water and sewer division. That's where you receive your water bill, and we actually process those payments and run that department out of what's called an enterprise fund. And the enterprise fund is used to account for operations that are financed and operated in a manner similar to a private business operation. And the intent of the cost of the operation is to primarily be funded by user charges. So we primarily fund the water and sewer accounts with the utility payments that we receive from our customers.
Yeah, Andrea, can I interrupt you for 1 second? We'll have another session on the water department, water plant, but I know we'll probably get some questions on this because when people get their water bills, we also are billing not just for Berea Water and Berea Sewer, but also for the regional sewer district. We bill on their behalf. And so as they've watched their bills go up, and that's probably a result of the regional sewer district, because our water and sewer rates have not increased in many years. So I just wanted to state that because there might be some questions about that. And again, we'll have another session specifically on that topic.
Okay. Just to dive into our second business type fund, we have what's called internal service funds. Our internal service funds we use to account for the financing of goods and services provided by one department of the city to another on a cost reimbursement basis. So for the city of Berea, our internal service funds are our health insurance, workers' compensation, and property liability funds. And basically what we do is that we are self-insured in those three areas. So we have a fund where we keep the revenue that we do chargebacks to some of our internal departments, and some of where we receive some of the proceeds that relate to health insurance or workers' compensation or property liability claim. As we move on, our last type of funds are fiduciary funds. And fiduciary funds act as a trustee. We're acting as a trustee for those funds that are collected. They're usually agency funds. So they're purely custodial in nature. We get this money in, we're actually collecting it for another agency, and as the custodian, we have to pay that money out to that agency. So as the mayor spoke about the Northeast Ohio Regional Sewer District, that's our first agency fund. So as you're paying your water and sewer bills, the money that relates to the regional sewer is put into a fund, and then we remit those funds to them on a quarterly basis. We also have contract retainer funds in the agency area, and that's when there's a building project and a contractor has to leave a deposit to make sure that construction is done correctly. We keep that money until those funds are released and the construction is completed. So we're going to move on to where does the money come from? And we have an example here. We have 2019, and a majority of our money comes from income taxes. So for 2019, out of the total revenue, income taxes made up 65%, and that was $13,607,927. Our next largest area is property taxes. Those are 12% at $2,481,134. And as we go along, we have intergovernmental revenues that we receive from state agencies, charges for services that would be ambulance fees, building department fees. Fees would move into fees, fines, and permits.
Andrea, let me interject. The charges there, that's where we have the rec center would come out of here. Because we threw this, as we call it, governmental funds mirror. We tried to separate this out from the water, in the sewer area. These are ones that we oversee, and we call them all our governmental accounting funds. So that would include those.
So if you go back to our fund listing, that would be the general fund and our special revenue funds, the capital projects funds, all of those that were included in that slide. That's what this total revenue represents.
Yes.
Okay, so we're going to move on to where does the money go? So for us at the City of Berea, most of the money in general goes to payroll. Our largest departments are police and fire. Police and fire make up 37% of the budgeted expenditures out of governmental operating funds. And for 2019, that amount was $7,173,651. Our next area would be public works, and that's the service department. And that amount was 26% of the budget. And please understand, it's not just payroll for police and fire pension, it's full operations. Same way with service department, it's payroll and their full operations, which is the $4,948,431. And as we move along, the general government is the next largest. That would be everyone else outside of REC, the REC program, which you see at 10%. General government is 19%.
Andre, general government includes all. That's where we have our the employees' health insurance is coming out of there. And it takes care of the money we put towards our workers' comp and our property liability.
Yes, so even though
I'm sorry, Andre, go ahead.
Even though I mentioned generally in the range of expenses, our largest expense for each department obviously is payroll. Then the rest of the operations make up the rest of that number that you see in that percentage. But for the whole pie, for all of the operations for the city out of our governmental operating funds, police and fire makes up the majority, service in our general government. Then we move to recreation, and then the rest is housing and administrative services. So we had total expenses in 2019 of $19,331,062.
Before we move on, so you understand also, Mayor, this is just our operating funds. So what ends up happening is the difference that you saw, there's like a $2 million difference. The remainder of that money we can actually put towards capital and other things. And then we look at that as transfers. We also then look for grants. And, that's what cover our major purchases out of capital funds, the difference.
Yeah, so people understand, this is the governmental operating funds, but our total budget's around 60 to 70 million in any given year. And there's other funds that, like you're talking about, Andy, there's some capital funds and some other funds we deal with, but this is just this one type, and it covers our largest general expenses.
Yes.
This covers generally our operations, what you
Yes.
think of operations to be. So we're talking about the budget process. There are two types of budget processes that the finance department handles. We do what's called a tax budget that is passed by council generally in July. And that's where we determine the millage that we're going to send down to the county budget commission. And then throughout the year, we do an appropriation budget, and that's the actual budget council passes for all of the departments and all of the operations of the city. Appropriation budget, I'll turn over to Andy to have him explain our appropriation budget.
Okay, how it works is we have to have a permanent budget that is passed by March 31st of the incoming year. And a lot of times what happens, what we do, we end up passing a temporary budget. And the reason why we do that, I know there's been questions, even the mayor over the years with council, why do we always pass a temporary budget? Well, the main reason is mostly because we have grants or we have major capital projects outstanding that we don't know the exact numbers until the end, so we want to carry these numbers over. So we basically give time to close out the year. We work with departments going into the new year, we get some of their needs, and it makes it easier, makes it cleaner. Basically, the steps for the budget process is you can look at the expenditure needs. We get them for the various departments. Basically, I meet with all the departments, find out what they need, and we try to put them into, see what's most important, prioritize. I meet with the mayor, determine what some of his needs are. Then I take that and look at what our revenues, what I project for the future, and go from there. And then we basically try to balance it out to keep this simple. And throughout the year, we basically monitor it. And when things come up, for example, unexpected expenses like health insurance may be higher, we have to make cuts. And we discuss that internally as a group. And then we make the adjustments as we go. You can go to the next slide, Andrea.
If I can add,
I'm not as polished as Andrea. I just, with the stuff, I kind of basically work with departments, with mayor.
yeah, just so we understand, or everyone understands that our budget goes from January 1st through December 31st. So when we do a temporary budget, we can only go through the end of March. Then we have to have something permanent in place. So I know you mentioned that, Andy. I just wanted to make sure people understood the parameters of that.
Yeah, it's just, I'm trying to, like I said, Mayor, we've done this for so long and worked with all the departments, and I think we do pretty well together. We try to give everybody what they need, because let's be honest, everybody wants everything, but we've gotten better over the years to where we try to budget close to actual. We don't just want to give a certain dollar amount. We try to work with them and make sure they get what they need to a point, and we go from there. And I think it's worked for these prior years. We were good as a group, even with the unions and everything else. We try to go across the board and help. So basically, how that works, and once we get it prepared, we have the worksheets are presented to council. And if they want to have a work session, we meet with them and answer their questions. And then hopefully we get the budget is passed, and it has to be passed by law by March 31st. Then we basically send out a copy of the budget to all the departments. And what happens moving forward, like I kind of mentioned, we do make adjustments, and we have to stay in balance. And if things come up, we have to make adjustments then. And like right now, everything that's been happening with the cares with the COVID, obviously that threw our budget off. And we've been working as a group. We made some cuts as a team, and I think we've done a great job, Mayor. I think you would, we've by having everybody work as a group, we've been able to get through this. I think it's worked. I think it's a testament to how we work as good as a group.
I think since we were all here, all three of us were here many years ago, and Andrea left for a while and came back, and Andy and I think, started the same year, many years ago before I was mayor. I think what we've tried to build is getting people to work as a team, like you said, Andy. Instead of each department saying, well, this is my piece of the pie, and the money's there, so I'm going to figure out a way to spend it. That's sometimes how government works. And I think our group over the years, they don't do that. They understand that they have a piece of the pie, but they're part of a bigger pie, and that just because money's there, that doesn't mean they have to spend it. And they share resources, they talk to each other. And when we do have an issue, like this year, where we had to make significant cuts because of COVID, everyone came together and worked collectively, the directors, the chiefs, the city engineer. And so I think it's a nice group to work with, a good group of people who understand that. And they're not wasteful in how they go about managing their budgets.
Well, I agree. And I think that's one of the things you started years ago, how you put this as a role for mine to separate out, to work with them individually, each director, and kind of talk through the process and make them understand. And I think it's taken time, but it's worked. And I think now it's more as a team, like we said, we go back to team group effort, but it has been across the board. I think it's worked well. So that's kind of how we've been doing it now. It's like now we're working, we just had a meeting before we're doing this one to kind of went over everything, where we stand, talked as a group, see where we're going to be the year, and some of the start to put some projections for next year. It's what we're working on right now. So keep it as simple. That's kind of how we do it.
And just to go along with the budget, there are budget goals generally done on a 5-year basis. And we have the same kind of budget goals that you would have for your own home budget. We're trying to eliminate our debt, build up some equity to be used for future projects, or just to make sure that we're secure financially. Okay. So that's all we have for the finance department. I know it's not always exciting. So
You guys did a good job. The finances are never exciting, well, unless they're finance people like you might find it exciting, but it's definitely confusing. And so I want to thank you for, helping clarify some points. And again, if people have questions based on what they see on Facebook or our website, they can always post those or email those to us. The one thing I did want to cover is the go back to property tax. So one of the areas that oftentimes comes up with finances is probably the most commonly asked question or point of confusion would be our property tax. And so if you get a property tax bill, there is a breakdown there, and I encourage people to look at that. A majority of your property taxes are not for the city. We actually take a very small percentage of it. The majority goes to the Berea schools and the county, and then there's other taxing entities. Tri-C gets a portion of that, the metro parks, the library. So for our operating purposes, we actually get a small portion of that. I think the other thing to remember too is, the income tax that we take is relatively small as well. It doesn't, depending on where you live or where you work, but it doesn't go above 2%. So, we provide a lot of services, but actually take a small amount of taxes from property tax as well as income tax. And I just kind of wanted to say that because I think that's a point of confusion for a lot of people in my years here, as people have expressed that to me. So once again, I want to thank Andy and Andrea for your work for the city, as well as for taking the time to do this presentation today. It's well done. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thanks.